Hi, everyone. I'm Fanny, Marketing Manager here at Kids and Company. Thank you all so much for joining us today for today's webinar. We would like to welcome Julia Swagan, the founder and director of Attune Families. Attune Families is a child and family therapy practice located in Toronto, offering virtual and in-person services. Their commitment is to help parents find peace with their families, build connections, and help their children thrive. Today, Julia will be discussing the importance of strong, connected family relationships, why so many families struggle to maintain healthy relationships, and what can be done about it. We're so thrilled to have Julia join us today. If you have any questions throughout the session, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will ensure that all your questions will be addressed towards the end of today's session. So Julia, it's over to you.
So thank you for the introduction, Fanny. I'm really happy to be here. Family relationships, and especially as they relate to children's mental health, is a very important topic for us to be discussing. And I'm so glad that so many of you are able to be here for us to have this discussion. And it is a discussion. I'm going to certainly share with you some thoughts and some stories, and we've left lots of time. So if you do have questions or thoughts that come up along the way, please do make use of that Q&A function so that I can speak to any thoughts or questions that you have. So today is really about connection. It's about me sharing some information that is hopefully helpful to you. It's also about inspiration and a renewed sense of energy and purpose when it comes to how we show up for our families. And this is obviously a virtual space, and we have quite a large audience today. When this presentation is done in person, I share the same thing, which is that we hope for this space to be non-judgmental. I've really never met a parent or a family that I've worked with who didn't come upon their struggles honestly. And so we really don't bring judgment into what we do. We want this to be a validating space. All of those struggles are valid, a supportive space, and an inclusive space. So we work with all kinds of different families, and families come in all different forms, and so we do strive to be inclusive in that way. And so today I'm going to talk about why families struggle. We see so many families. It is so common for families to have challenges. We're going to talk about the 3 pillars that I have found create success in parenting, and also we'll touch on how we at Attune Families can help. So I know this presentation is in honor of Children's Mental Health Week, which passed not long ago. 1 in 5 children is diagnosed with a mental health concern. We also know that the onset of 70% of mental health problems in people have their onset in childhood or adolescence, but it takes an average of 11 years from the onset of symptoms for children to receive proper treatment. There are a lot of reasons for that. And I hope that part of what we're doing today is helping to raise awareness about children's mental health and the connection between relationships and mental health. By focusing on children's mental health, we really have to focus on family mental health because we're all connected in a family. And I hope that it will help you either prevent or intervene early in any, mental health or mental well-being concerns in your children or family. So on that note, I really want to thank you for being here. Just you showing up today is a step in the right direction. I love getting parents together in groups, because I think as a community, as a society, it's really, really, really important for us to continue having conversations about mental health. Mental health is such an integral part of overall health. It's so important for daily functioning. It's so important that we work together against the barriers that we're facing to try to raise healthy, happy, and functioning children. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of what I'm sure is a busy day to focus on your kids and your family, and to also help us in our mission to raise awareness and provide more early recognition, early intervention, and prevention around children's mental health. So a little bit about me. I am the director of Attuned Families. Attuned Families is a child and family therapy practice and parent coaching practice. We have physical locations in the Junction and Bloor West Village in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and we serve families virtually all over Ontario and BC. And we also consult to schools and childcare and other organizations around children's mental health, because again, we're really, while we are, providing innovative treatment when needed, we are also really big on early intervention and prevention, and consulting to larger organizations allows us to do that. I've been a child and family therapist for almost 20 years, but above all, I am a human parent. I live with my husband, my 2 kids, and our dog, and each of them humbles me every day. So I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a perfect parent, or even always the model of what to do. I'm, finding my way and doing my best, just like you. So as I said, I am certainly not a perfect parent. However, before I had kids, because of what I do, and because, I'd always been told I'd be a great parent and everything, I had some really idealistic ideas about what family life would look like. I thought we would just all frolic through meadows wearing white clothing and no one would ever get dirty, and it would all be sunshine and rainbows, because I had so much experience working with children. I really, really went into it, honestly, overconfident and underprepared. And at first, actually, things went relatively easily for my family. But then we ran into some challenges, and a lot of what is common in many families, like sleep deprivation and adjusting to these new roles and, raising kids. We also had, my first child went through, unfortunately, some trauma, and I had loss, and we came across, some not as common challenges as well. And it really threw us into a bit of a tailspin. We started seeing some challenging behaviors in my older daughter, and the way that I had been trained at the time was in a more behaviorist approach. I won't go too much into that, but I pulled out the solutions that I had been taught, in my undergrad and my master's, and additional training and stuff that I used in the workplace, and it actually did not work in my family. And not only did it not work, it actually made things worse. So here I am, finding myself with an acting out child and another on the way. My confidence was deeply shaken, especially because I had so far to fall, because I went into it so confident, so overconfident. I felt totally out of sorts. And because of what I did, especially working in schools, you could work with a child of any age, and there's a reasonable amount of documentation, and through taking a history with a family, I could always sort of go back and say, the point of early intervention was like 8 years ago, right? I could see that. And so in my own family, because I knew what we were dealing with and the possible implications for where it would take us, what path it would take us down, I actually felt quite a sense of urgency around what I was seeing. And I knew that I needed to figure out how to manage the situation differently. So I set to doing a lot of research, really just for my own parenting. I spoke to colleagues. I ended up retraining in an approach that I use, actually several approaches that I now use today with clients, but this at the time was really just for my own family. And what I learned blew me away, because we really think of parenting about behaviors often. And what I learned is that really a parent's power is in their relationship with their child. And it blew me away because it is so simple. And like the concept is so simple, but relationships are so complex. And fostering healthy relationships in families, it's a complex process. So it seemed simple, but I quickly discovered that it was not as simple as just knowing what to do. Because most parents can learn theories and learn skills, right? And if that were the answer, we would all take a parenting course and be merrily on our way and everything would be fine. The problem is there are so many things that get in the way of being able to put that knowledge and those skills to practice. And that's what I found in myself. Believe me, I know a lot about parenting. I know a lot of what is needed. I know a lot of what, we recommend around parenting. And I can't always show up the way that I want to my kids. Because knowledge and skills are really just one of the pillars that I feel hold us up so that we can be the parents that we want to for our kids. And I'm going to get to the pillars. But once I had these 3 pillars in place, I started to enjoy really fulfilling relationships with my children. I started to enjoy my children and enjoy parenting. I know that sometimes parenting can feel like a life sentence, and I have felt that. And when I sort of figured out the components that I needed in my life and in our family life, for me to show up the way I wanted to, parenting has actually become very enjoyable. But not only that, I've really seen how these relationships, how our family relationships have supported our children to grow and develop and thrive. Because we know from the research, there's a lot of really good research out there that tells us that relationship is really the foundation on which all other child development rests. So overall child development is really dependent on healthy relationships. And so this shift and this really profound experience ignited in me a passion and a real drive to help other families, because I was actually really astounded at how I had managed to get through an undergrad, many years of working, and a master's degree without and a lot of this is out there more now, but at the time it wasn't. My kids are older now. But I just couldn't believe that as a professional, there was still so much that I didn't know about relationship and child development. And the moms on the playground at pick up and drop off didn't really want to hear about it every single day. And I was feeling really passionate about it. So I started working with families just to see what happened. And long story short, that work exploded into a very busy group practice that I spoke about earlier. So what I really find is that when families find connection, parents find peace, and children thrive. And every child deserves the opportunity to thrive, but also every parent deserves the opportunity to enjoy their children. Every family deserves to have healthy family relationships. So why is family life so hard? And family life is hard for many, many families. It's really, I would say it's really like a select few. It's a minority of families who are like loving life together. And there's a reason for that. And the most important thing that I want you to take away from this is that if you are not enjoying your family life, if your kids are struggling, if anyone in your family is struggling, it is not your fault. You can be a big part of the solution, but that does not mean that it's your fault. you were not set up for success in raising healthy, happy kids or in establishing healthy relational patterns in your family. Our culture puts unreasonable expectations on our children, which also puts unrealistic expectations on us. We don't do a good job in our society of supporting families or parents. This was meant to be done. Parenting was meant to be done with a group supporting you. It wasn't meant to be done in isolation. And that's how so many families have to function. Our children experience too much separation from us before they're ready. This is sort of a complex concept that we don't really have time to go too deeply into today, at least not so far. But essentially, that can be physical separation. So, they're away from us too much too early, or it can be like a psychological sense of separation. So like experiencing disapproval or lack of emotional connection. Many families have too much on their plate. People are so busy. There are so many different pressures. And many of us are trying to raise our kids differently from how we were raised, which in itself is a full-time job, because you end up questioning every decision you make, and that is absolutely exhausting and draining. So you weren't set up for success in the first place, which means that we really need to bring a heightened level of consciousness to our parenting. And a lot of what we actually know is really helpful in showing up differently for your kids is your own self-reflection and your own personal growth. And so just by being here today, you're actually engaging in that. So the 3 pillars that I believe create the foundation for healthy relationships in families established by healthy parenting practices are the skills and knowledge piece, self-care, and support, a good support system. So there's really no magic bullet. There's no magic solution. There's no magic wand. But there are things that we can do, and it doesn't require an overhaul. You don't necessarily have to transform your entire life and lifestyle. You don't have to move off the grid. This can be achieved through small changes. So the first pillar is skills and knowledge. So engaging in a practice that increases your knowledge about child development. So reading, working with a professional, listening to a podcast, whatever it is that works for you. But a lot of frustration in parenting comes from parents having expectations of their children that children actually aren't capable of meeting. And children can look, one of the places where I experienced frustration with my daughter and this misunderstanding in the early days is she was very verbal, and she looked and presented as so much more capable than she really was, because when they're really verbal, they seem older and they seem more capable, but she really didn't have the skills that I thought were sort of behind that. And so then when you expect them to be able to do something and they can't, that creates a lot of frustration. It's also important to know about the science of relationships, what actually supports healthy relationships. And then to learn just about some simple relationship skills. And when I say simple, there's, it's always simple in theory, but sometimes complex in application. But it's not just about skills. And Dan Siegel, who's a really well-respected professional in the field, says that as children develop, their brains mirror their parents' brain. In other words, the parent's own growth and development, or lack of those, impact the child's brain. As parents become more aware and emotionally healthy, their children reap the rewards and move toward health as well. So if you're coming into parenting with old wounds and with high stress, as you look after yourself and as you do some processing and healing around that, it creates space for your children to develop higher emotional intelligence, and be emotionally healthier as well. So I would say your healing is your child's healing. And just to say that many parents experience sort of how do I say this? Parenthood opens up a lot of wounds sometimes. I like to say, like, children kind of come with a little flashlight to shine, and they have this amazing way of sort of shining a light on our unfinished business. They know how to push our buttons. Parenting brings things up for us. And as much as that can be really inconvenient and painful, I really see it as an opportunity, because it gives us the opportunity to really grow as people and to heal and to break patterns of intergenerational trauma and to create a healthier future for our kids. But no matter how much you know and how many skills you have, if you're not up for it, you can't do it. And, self-care can be sort of a tricky subject. Some people are tired of hearing about self-care, but self-care is really important. And so what I've done is just given a few examples of things that are really quite easy to do, that also have good impact. Behavior change is really, really challenging. So as much as it could seem really simple to just start doing 5 daily gratitudes, it's actually really challenging to start new habits and to break unhealthy habits. But I want to give you the opportunity to maybe pick something on this page, whether it's 5 daily gratitudes, taking up a yoga class once a week, 1 minute of mindfulness per day, a 20-minute walk once a week, maybe with a friend, so that you can have some social time as well. Maybe there's something else that works for you, that you just haven't been prioritizing. I want to give you the opportunity right now to make a commitment to yourself, something you can follow through on, and write it down. If you have a pen and paper handy or in your phone, maybe text it to a friend or your partner. I'm going to start doing, whatever the thing is, just to help you be able to be a bit more centered and care for yourself a little bit, so that you can show up just a little bit differently for your family. And then the third pillar is support. So as I said, this really was not meant to be done alone. We're not supposed to parent in a small family unit with so many demands on us. There's supposed to be a circle of care around you. And so it's really hard to do it without that. And many of you are lucky. It sounds like you already have a childcare center in your corner that's part of your circle, and they take the time to engage the community and bring you helpful information. And I see them doing things like bringing families together, and that is so wonderful. Support can come in instrumental support. So it could be, if it's available to you, having someone just come and clean your house once a week, maybe having a parent or someone provide some childcare on the weekends so that you can go and look after yourself. Even finding another family to swap play dates so that you get a bit of extra time to yourself. Informal support would be those friendships and family who can rally around you and support you in different ways. So that could be like the play date swap. It could be just having more social time even can be a real great support. And then professional support, if you have a child with special needs or medical needs, making sure that those are looked after. If you have medical needs, making sure that those are looked after through the right professional. Obviously, therapy, psychotherapy, which we do here, is a form of professional support. But take a moment to reflect on what kind of support you might be lacking. And if you're wondering, like, do I need professional support? I was just contacted by the head of one of the emergency services in Toronto yesterday to say, we need your help because we're seeing a lot of, pretty significant concerns in different people. And my response was like, yes, absolutely, we can help. And what can we do so that we're getting to people sooner? Because I think there's still sort of this idea that you need to wait for a crisis. People tend to wait for a crisis to seek out professional support. But what I would love to see is for people to avoid that crisis in the first place. Now, not all crises can be avoided. But in order to sort of determine, or to help you determine whether or not professional help would be good for you, you can ask yourself the following questions. So, am I able to make changes in my family with ease? So can I decide, we need to switch up this routine because it's going to be better for everyone, and can I make that happen relatively easily? Or do I get stuck in the same old patterns that I'm not happy with? So am I repeating unhealthy patterns? Overall, am I lacking in support? So sometimes people turn more to professional support when they don't have as much informal support. Thinking about your own history that you came into parenting with. Do you have things that it would be helpful for you to process and clear away? Do you have trouble implementing better self-care and making positive changes? So some of these are indicators that it actually may be quite helpful for you to seek out professional support. So one of the things we say in the type of therapy we do is that it's about 1 degree of change, making small changes for big impact. And sometimes we don't make changes because it doesn't seem like a little change would do much. But I want you to look at these two. There's sort of like a fork in the road here, and there's a path. And imagine if you take 1 step to the left versus 1 step to the right. And then you just keep walking. So you made you changed your direction just a little bit by 1 degree. You're going to be parenting for a long time. So if you kept walking for, let's say 18 years, let's say 15 years, let's say 10 years, think about how far away the 2 endpoints are just from taking that 1 step in a different direction. And in here, just to make it super clear for you, the one path ends up in a not so nice place and the other path ends up with rainbows and sunshine. But so a lot of families think that they need an overhaul, and that's usually not true. Usually we're just taking one step at a time in a different direction. And by the time you sort of finish the work or your kids are older, you look back and you could see how worth it was to just make those small changes. So I want to give you a moment to do a bit of a reflection. If you are a busy person, this might be really annoying, but it's also really, really good for you. So if you can put your feet on the floor, close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. And I want you to just consider, bring your family life into consciousness, reflect on your kids, reflect on your family, reflect on how you're feeling. It can be so hard to just stop and take a step back and really tune in to what's going on. And I want you to think about what's going well in your family. Even if right now that's just one small, small thing. And I want you to think about maybe one small step that you can take in a different direction, one little thing that you could do. And if you are feeling like something's got to change, I want to give you the opportunity to take a moment to figure out what would be the first step towards making that change. If you're concerned about something that's happening in your family, something you're seeing in your child, what would be the first step towards creating change around that concern? And of course, there are going to be some things that you actually can't change. So focus on the things that actually you do have control over. So that could be reaching out to a friend and getting together. It could be just deciding to do a bit more socializing with your family, just to lift everyone's mood. It could be maybe to back off of some activities and reduce the busyness. You may have decided that you need professional support and you don't know where to turn for it. And so what would be your next step? Perhaps doing some research, or just maybe you've been meaning to reach out to someone and you just haven't done it. So I want to give you the opportunity again to just make a commitment to yourself, something that you know you can follow through on, and decide to just do one thing to take a step in the right direction. One more deep breath. You can open your eyes if you haven't already. At Attune Families, we have a commitment to the public, which is that if you need support and you reach out to us, you will never be turned away. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll work with one of us. You might, and that's great. But if you are struggling with something that we don't treat, or that we don't provide support around, we have a very comprehensive list of supports, and we will make sure that we either connect you or send you in the right direction so that you took a step on that path towards getting where you need to get. And so don't hesitate to reach out to our client care coordinator, Anne-Marie. If you're struggling with something, if we can't provide you support, we will find you someone who can. And that includes paid services and free services. So this is just our contact information in case anyone does want to be in touch. And I would love, Fanny, to take any questions that have come up for anyone during the presentation. This is my favorite part, is when we get to have a discussion.
Yeah, that was amazing, Julia. Thank you so much. So we do have some questions for you, for our audiences. So one of them is, how can technology be harnessed to promote positive mental health and well-being in children?
Ooh, how can it be harnessed? Well, and do you mean like the technology that you have access to at your fingertips, or how are we seeing like innovation in this space? Like I can speak to, like, there are technologies available now. Like one of the therapies that we work with is a special listening system that provides like a retuning of the nervous system. So it helps people and children. It's especially helpful for children where talk therapy isn't necessarily accessible, but it helps improve behavior regulation, emotion regulation, and essentially social, I don't like to call them social skills, but it opens up the social engagement system. And there are other forms of, like, for example, neurofeedback, which we don't do. So they're definitely using technology in the therapeutic space. If you're talking about technology that you have in your home, ready access to, I mean, there are mindfulness apps. You have like so many different mindfulness meditations and exercise opportunities to follow along with exercise and whatnot at your fingertips, for example, on YouTube. Technology is a social vehicle as well, so it can help with socializing. But that's sort of what's at the top of my mind. But if you want to clarify based on my answer, if you want to clarify your question at all, if I haven't gotten to what you're looking for, please feel free to do so in the Q&A.
It was a general question, Julia, so I think you answering for both points really helps our audience.
Great.
Another question we had was, are there any specific challenges or issues related to children's mental health that have emerged or intensified in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that, yes, mental health problems in general have been intensified. The areas that we've seen, that we did see quite a spike in, are eating disorders, which would be mostly in older children, but even in children as young as 5. And screen addiction has been quite a thing, right? The other thing, though, that happened during the pandemic is we took a really big step towards destigmatizing mental health concerns, because pretty much like most people were struggling, and it became a lot more okay to talk about. I would say that now we've seen a lot of concerns related to you know, trauma from like the pandemic. It's not over. It's not just like you flick a switch and like we're not on lockdown and everyone's okay again. It doesn't just resolve overnight. Some people haven't reemerged from their homes and felt safe going out. And we've seen a lot of regression in kids. We've seen a lot more incontinence in childcare and school settings as kids reintegrated, and we've seen a lot of kids who actually had a bit of an easier time when they were closer to home and closer to family more of the time, having a hard time, and adults too, actually, and having a hard time with the like back to normal. So I would say that's sort of we keep up on all of the research in child and family mental health, because we get asked to present to large organizations so that they're informed about the landscape in children's mental health, like doctors and schools and whatnot. So yeah, those are sort of the trends that we've seen.
Amazing. And we have a couple more questions here, and just a reminder to all of our attendees, if you have questions that you want to ask Julia, please type it in the Q&A function. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions. This is a great opportunity to get your answers, to get your questions answered by an expert. So with that being said, the next question for you, Julia, is how can parents and caregivers effectively communicate with mental health professionals such as yourself to advocate for their child's needs?
To advocate for their child to receive services?
Yes, so they're wondering how can they effectively communicate with professionals such as yourself in order to get what their child needs?
Oh, I wouldn't hope that there would be any barriers to that. So I don't know why, like with us, we're very big on involving parents. Like we actually prefer not to work with children directly unless we are also working with parents. So there should be very open lines of communication. And as a parent, you should have a really good understanding and should be consenting and in agreement and on board with any sort of treatment that's being provided. I wouldn't want a parent to feel that they need to sort of fight for their child to be receiving the right kind of support. As I'm thinking this through, I'm wondering, like, is there maybe you're running into wait lists or other barriers to receiving service? But if you're working with a service provider and you're not feeling heard and you're not feeling that the treatment is on point, I would really encourage you to raise that concern and to have that conversation.
Thank you, Julia. And we have another question here on if you have any tips on handling separation anxiety in toddlers.
Yes, absolutely. I have tips on handling separation anxiety. So your goal when you're separating from a little one is to validate their feelings and try to find ways that they can hold on to, they can't yet really hold on to the idea of you in their mind for that long. And that's part of why it's so distressing for them to separate. So do you have a transitional object? Can you talk about the point of reconnection instead of like, bye, mommy or daddy's going or parents going? When I pick you up, I'm going to be bringing you apple slices and we're going to sit outside for a few minutes. And then to really bump up the moments of connection when you're with them. So like when they wake up in the morning, having a really like positive climate in the home and taking those few minutes to really connect with them and snuggle and maybe read a book. I know mornings are so rushed and this is like easier said than done. Can bedtime be a really connected time? And then also matchmaking with their teacher. So, you know, ideally we have a consistent secondary caregiver, or what we would call like clinically like an attachment figure at daycare. And so making friends with that person and talking about that person and sort of what you're doing is you're sort of transferring your trust to your child. So saying, you know, teacher Sally loves dogs just like we love dogs. We should ask her about her dog. Finding things they have in common. But it's really quite normal and natural for them to have trouble separating from you. So you want to boost up the connection and help them sort of hold on to you by pointing to the point of reconnection, by sending them with a transitional object. I put tons of kisses in your bunny and your bunny has lots of kisses for you all day long. And when you're having your lunch, I'm going to be having my lunch. And then also making sure that they have a really nice relationship to turn to with their teacher who's taking over caring for them at daycare. Does that make sense? But it doesn't mean there won't be tears, and that part's really hard.
Amazing. And then we have another question here, and this one is about different parenting styles. Mm-hmm. So one of our attendees, she's saying that she and her husband have different parenting styles and they're struggling. Yeah. She's reached out to friends and professionals for support, and they want to focus on building healthy relationships, whereas her husband has a very authoritarian parenting style and is very much against any new research on parenting styles and refuses to reach out. So the relationship with their younger daughter is struggling, and they wanted to get any tips on how to inspire her partner to kind of get her husband to be more involved.
Yeah. It's so tough when you come into parenting with a partner and discover that you're sort of far apart in your ideologies. And really what that's about is what you've been through in your lives and what you've each come to the table with. The therapy that we do, called emotion-focused family therapy, we can actually do family therapy with one person in the family, and that will impact everyone in the family. So even if your husband doesn't change at all, if you do things differently, that will really help. But part of emotion-focused family therapy is engaging a member of the family, if this is the case and there's a member in the family who could use support but who's very resistant. It's developing skills in you to help, and also the therapist working at trying to engage the partner in the process. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, it's challenging. It's really challenging situation, but I would say the best thing to do, if the professionals that you've connected with are able to do some of that type of work, we find emotion-focused family therapy particularly helpful for that type of situation.
Thank you, Julia. And then one other question is, are there any specific considerations for children from diverse cultural backgrounds when addressing their mental health needs?
Yeah, I mean, the mental health crisis is worldwide. I think it's important that when we use a Western lens to look at mental health, that we really take the time to get to know families and how cultural norms are coming into play in ways that are really supportive of mental health, or ways that maybe aren't so supportive. And so it can be somewhat tricky to navigate, but I would think that I think every family is really their own. Their parents you are the experts on your children. So we would never want therapy to feel like it conflicts with cultural practices that are important for maintaining. So it's really just navigating that. What I see happen in my practice is that some of the dynamics that will come into play is having, grandparents involved, and maybe parents have sort of moved a little bit further away from certain cultural practices. And then that creates a bit of conflict between the parents and the grandparents. And then it's tricky because, okay, my parents are looking after my kids, but they're not instilling all the values and using all the practices that I want them to do because they have their way, right? And so I think that's a special consideration. I really don't think that you need to lose nor that you should lose any sense of your cultural identity in order to support mental health in kids.
Great. And they were wondering if you have any suggestions on how to approach conversations with our children around estranged family relationships. They're worried that these estranged relationships set an example of unhealthy relationships for their children.
Strained family relationships, like between the adults, for example? So
sorry, go ahead.
I would say, like, generally speaking, I would only answer questions my kids are asking. So if my kids are saying, how come Auntie so-and-so doesn't come around anymore? Then, I mean, you can choose. It depends on the age of your kid and where they're at developmentally, and also on their temperament. Sometimes we decide to protect kids from, and we want to protect kids as much as possible from family conflict. Family conflict can be present and not affect kids if they don't know about it and it's not happening around them or in front of them. So you might kind of brush it off or say like, oh, she's busy. Or you might say, oh, we decided not to get together as often. I would really be mindful of where your child is developmentally and really be on a need to know basis. And then work through the grown-up stuff among the grown-ups. If it's a situation where this child had a close relationship with someone and there's been a real rupture and that person can't be in the picture, that's a bit of a different story. And I would want to know more, because each situation is so individual. And it would be something to sort of work through and carefully plan around. But what we do know is that children really need one secure base in a person, ideally more, but having one person who's really safe for them, and reliable and consistent, and they can enjoy a healthy attachment relationship with, that's a huge protective factor for children, for later relationships, mental health, addictions, behavior. Yeah.
Great. And we wanted to know, how do you know when to go to family therapy or individual therapy?
Again, that's really individual. It depends on the situation. I think that if you're just struggling with something on your own that doesn't necessarily relate to family, but maybe has peripheral impacts, then maybe you're looking at individual therapy. If it relates to the family relationships, or if it's about concerns in like things you're seeing in your child, then family therapy can be indicated. The types of family therapy that we do don't always mean that the whole family is in the room. We could be having like a one-on-one session with a child and a one-on-one session with one parent or both parents. It really depends on the situation. It's really tailored to what's presenting in that particular family. But if you're uncertain and you want to get in touch with Anne-Marie, she can listen to what's going on for you, and she'll know, like, she has a background in social work as well. And she'll know, like, I hear what you're saying. I know someone who's really good for that. Let me refer you here. Or actually, we do this kind of work, and let me connect you with one of our therapists. Yeah.
Amazing. And we have one last question here for you, Julia, and that is, are your offerings covered by benefits packages at most companies?
Most companies, yes. So what we offer is typically covered under like your extended benefits package at work. Also, our services are covered under OAP funding. So if you have a child with an autism diagnosis and you're receiving OAP funding from the government, our services are eligible for reimbursement through the OAP program as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Julia, for today. That was all the questions we have, and I want to thank you to everyone that attended here today as well for showing up and really, get this conversation going, especially since it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And like Julia mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it was Children's Mental Health Awareness Week at the beginning of May. So really appreciate your knowledge today, Julia, and the services that Attune families have to offer us. We would like to remind all participants that there will be a recording following today's session. And thanks again to Julia for sharing and presenting today's Kidco talk.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to be with all of you.